Slow, deep, and hard. Just sounds pornographic. Then again, considering Typo Negative's frontman and bassist's name is Peter Steele, that kind of just fits the theme. Now, it's time for the Typo Negative discography to get rolling, but first, a little bit of a forewarning. I'm not going to touch the stuff with Carnivore, only because this is a Typo Negative discography. If I want to talk about that stuff, I'll do that at a later date, but for now, let's just talk about the band that everybody really knows Peter Steele from, and let's start with the debut. The debut, Slow, Deep, and Hard, is a mammoth opus, and by opus I'm talking about principally its length, not necessarily trying to predetermine whether or not I'm going to swing this review to the good side or the bad. It's a massive gothic opera style that has plenty of punky vision to it, a lot of sampling, a lot of doom overtures, some droning. It really just has a lot of different characters to it. Now, you may be wondering why all of those girls that you know that are between the ages of 18 and 35 that dress gothy and claim their love for Peter Steele and want to touch his penis even though he's been dead now for a couple of years really came from. Well, Slow, Deep, and Hard was kind of the inception point of that. That's whenever the first people really got to have their touch and taste of Typo Negative. And this is an album that actually has a very strange story behind it that sort of fits that. The true tale about this story is that it's kind of a massive opera that's dedicated to a very poor relationship that Peter Steele himself was a part of. And let's face it, whenever it comes to an album, this is something that we are all instantly relatable with. And bad relationships are something that happen to, I would say, a healthy percentage of us. I would not say all of us, because some are fortunate enough to meet the one for them the very first time around. But most of the time, whenever that happens, well, they're just way too happy. And it just kind of bothers you. This album is definitely not one that's going to bother you if you have an open mind. Those people who listen to the latter era Typo Negative work will perhaps trace themselves back to this inception point with Slow, Deep, and Hard and be a little bit confused. Perhaps not necessarily hearing the same zest and refinement that was characterized on albums such as October Rust or Life is Killing Me. Instead, they're going to find that there are lavish incorporations going on here. There are tons of samples that are interwoven along with doomy to nearly drone-style riffing that's then all of a sudden turned 180 degrees to aggressive punk Danzig-style muffling. It's just really kind of a unique environment to listen to, especially if you've listened to it for the first time. This is an album that's able to blend those different cultures together and, inspiringly so, create a romantic, or in this case anti-romantic, gothic, operatic, just epic work that's in the style of the gothic era. Now, with that also said, there is one thing that's incorporated in here that perhaps other gothic bands or other punk bands or other bands of any variety would really shudder away from incorporating, and that is the dark humor. Peter Steele and the guys in Typo Negative have been immortalized for their unique brand of cheeky, dark humor that can be heard in their lyrics, it can be heard in their music, it can be heard in renditions of covers that they've done, and even just within the album itself. This album does not feature what was at one point a Typo Negative staple after this of a opening that was a joke. You know, the very first track being something that is a joke, whether it be, 30 seconds of nothingness or high feedback, whatever it may be. Slow, Deep, and Hard did not feature that. However, the dark humor here is all in the lyrics. It's in calling her a slut and a whore in track number 1 after saying, "I know you're fucking someone else." It's basically his way of saying, "I know what you did, so you can't talk to me about me calling you a slut or a whore, because that's exactly what the fuck you are." And also, this is an album that, while it does have that dark humor incorporated within it, has that personal touch that actually can turn to the more, the depressive edge, the opposite. This is an album that really shows a mind that is going through a recent loss of a loved one, that you, in the form of a girlfriend or in the form of a loved one that you really cared about, who has wronged you. you start to really have questions and doubts. You start to really get upset and angry and depressed. You start to contemplate substance abuse or engage in substance abuse. You engage in angry taunting and catcalling. You start to moan and bemoan your situation. You begin to just kind of just sort of haul off into a limbo of sorts and just feel as though you are nothing. This album is able to incorporate each of those aspects. Now, another thing that some people may be turned off by this are the long sections of sampling. Now, long-time Typo Negative veterans will understand that this is something that they've done kind of in lesser and lesser droves as the band has produced more and more albums. However, with this one, it was something that was quintessential, considering each and every one of these songs were separated into multiple parts. You almost need to build the plot a little bit with these little samplings in order to kind of move the plot along as well as also drive the point home. That's why you hear the samples of a woman moaning in the first track, etc. It just simply builds the entire atmosphere and kind of puts you in that scene. It gets you there. That way, whenever you're hit with the curveball, whenever you're hit with the next thing, you understand where that comes from, but at the same time, you're still floored by it as though you were the person experiencing it and never saw it coming. Yeah, that was a really confusing way to explain that it basically puts you in his shoes. But it kind of makes sense to put it that way, considering relationships are never simple. Overall, as far as debuts are concerned, this is going to be one that may be passed over by some people. However, it's certainly built a strong and solid foundation that future albums were really going to be able to improve upon, not to mention also shine forward with. Slow, Deep, and Hard will always be touched as one of the most personal albums that Peter Steele wrote, as it dealt with a very real situation, but also it's going to be seen as one of the more unique environments that Typo Negative have put out. It's not necessarily going to be the most scary album that you listen to. In fact, if anything, it may be a little bit cheeky at times. But it's a really, really nice stepping stone start for this band that really showcased what they had kind of in their arsenal. Fans got to understand that these guys could go a lot of different ways with their music. And that's the reason why, as the numbers of fans began to escalate, more and more excitement started to develop with each new release that these guys were able to put out. Overall, Slow, Deep, and Hard, not damn bad at all. I give it an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed it, and I still enjoy it to this day. Now, it's time to move onward.